So now we're going to talk about how EMDR works in the brain. We've got to talk a little bit about the brain here. There's 3 levels to the brain. This is fairly common knowledge, I think. So the cerebral cortex is the thinking part of the brain. That's right in here. The limbic brain, or I'm calling the midbrain, is where emotions are stored, and that's down in here. And then the brainstem is here, and that's more primitive. So this is the amphibian brain, mammalian brain, and then the neocortex, or the modern man thinking brain. Now, what happens is when there's an emotionally charged situation, chemicals are flushed through the system. Now, we all know that. For example, if you're driving down the road and somebody pulls in front of you, you hit your brake, all of a sudden you're charged up, your autonomic nervous system has been activated. In that situation, then your body physiology changes. Your heart beats faster, your breathing changes, you may get clammy hands or something. Also, the thinking changes. You get focused in, your friends become enemies, you're unable to scan your brain for good situations. But the other thing that's not really seen is that the way memories are stored changes as well. And that then becomes the issue, that memories that are stored, emotional memories that are stored during emotionally charged situations, are stored differently than they are just in regular everyday life. So the brain stores information in different ways, and these emotionally charged memories are stored down in the limbic brain and the amygdala, actually, and they're stuck there. Is the problem. They become maladaptive. They aren't just moving on. This says memory storage here. And the difference is implicit versus explicit memory. So take a second here. The idea of the deck of cards is that when you learn a card game, you have to think of the rules. When you first learn it, you're thinking of the rules as you play the game. After a while, though, the rules start running in the background. In other words, you know the rules of the game as you play it. You don't have to think about them. Well, that's implicit memory. That's this one. And what happens then, the similarity there is that emotional memories and the emotional charge gets stored implicitly in the brain. Sometimes they say in recent memory, near-term memory, so that it's easily activated. And it's kind of always running in the background. So therefore, if something happens, one example, I got a shirt back from the laundry that had a stain on it. And I know that the laundry's not going to make good. I mean, they never have. But still, I'll get fired up and get angry. Oh, man, I got it. Well, it wasn't just about a shirt. It wasn't just about that. It was like the implicit memories running in the background, emotional memories were getting fired off, as well as this particular experience. And so then that causes you to overreact and to say and do stupid things. Touchstone events. So these are now, we're going to take a look at events in life that that are problematic. And like I say, they could be big T trauma, life-threatening, or it could be a little T trauma, which is chronic long-term, maybe not as obvious, or just a life situation that is lingering, keeps coming back. When this event happens, and I thought for an event we could use something fairly benign, which would be maybe the first time your mother got angry at you, or the first time you heard your parents argue. Think about that if you can, or one of the first time you remember. You can probably make an image of that event if you think about it. And so obviously that image of this event is stored somewhere in the midbrain. So, I mean, if you think about the event, and you can make a picture in your mind of the event, then obviously it's stored somewhere. And what we're suggesting is it's stored in the midbrain. Okay, so then What's not as well known and not addressed, as far as I know of, outside of EMDR, is the idea that not only is that image stored, but the emotion is stored and the body's sensations that were happening during the time of the event are stored. So if you think about the first time you saw your parents argue or heard them arguing or something, then you have an image of that, laying in bed looking at the ceiling maybe, but the feeling of fear, right, and the body sensations may be shivering or tensing up in some way. You know, when something happens that's fearful, then the body contracts. And that contraction is body sensation, and that body sensation gets stored. So then we're looking at is all these factors, the image, emotion, body sensation, all get stored in the midbrain. There's another piece to this puzzle, which is the image, emotion, body sensation all create what we call the negative cognition. And the negative cognition is the belief about the self during the time of the event. Now, the interesting thing about the negative cognition is that it's based on the emotions that were happening during the event, not on what was happening at the time. So in other words, if you're laying in bed hearing your parents argue, then, and you're feeling afraid and going, gosh, there's something wrong with me, I'm afraid and I shouldn't be, or whatever it is, then you'll make the belief based on that data, on the feeling, and not on the fact that your parents and don't know how to handle their differences effectively or in a mature manner. Now, this is why changing thinking has limits. It's because the belief you have about yourself from trauma events or from emotionally charged events is not based on the data of the event, but it's based on the feeling of the event. And so if you change the belief, but don't change the underlying feeling, then when the old feelings are activated, the old thinking reoccurs. But I would just suggest that you go to your own experience on this. For example, if you've done affirmations, say I'm a wonderful person, and you do it day after day, all day, you know, something will come along to where you don't feel like or believe you're a wonderful person. Well, that's because that feeling gets activated. All right, so what we're saying is that an event happens, an image gets stored in the midbrain, the feelings and body sensations during the event are stored, and also then a belief about the self gets stored as well, basically in the midbrain. So trauma memories are stored below the level of thought, and therefore thinking about it doesn't change the way the memory is stored. Well, you know, and that's interesting. That's why when you think about something over and over again, it doesn't change the way that memory is stored. It doesn't help. But changing thinking doesn't change the way the memory is stored either. And that's why the therapies of cognitive behavioral therapy is good. It'll get you to a point. But it won't cross that gap of the feeling experience that happened that now is stimulating the memory. So that's what I'm looking here. So the thinking is up here, the limbic emotion is down here. And what we're saying is changing this thinking doesn't change the way this feeling memory is stored. Okay, so we have neural networks in the brain, and then these networks start forming, I guess, throughout life, really. And basically what it is there's an experience with an image, a body sensation, a feeling, and then a negative cognition. And these start happening over and over again. So we have lots of experiences where there's an event, image, emotion, experience. And they can be good or not good. The not good ones are maladaptive. That's the maladaptive network. And basically, what the deal here is memories are associative, which means the good stuff associates together and all the bad stuff associates together. They're cumulative, and so that's important because that's why somebody might be a first responder and do it for 30 years and no problem. They go to a training and then they panic in a situation that they know is not dangerous. Well, that's because over time, the different traumas they have experienced have accumulated, and then they get triggered. In the maladaptive network, memories are frozen. So the idea here is that these emotional memories, the feeling sensation, the images, they're stuck, they're not moving. And that's really why it's maladaptive. On the other side of the equation here, then we have neural networks that are adaptive, and that's what we want. Here, the good stuff associated together, it accumulates, and it builds good, it's good. And we can use that as well, actually. But here the memories are more fluid. So good things just kind of flow through. And if you think about it, you don't ever get stuck on happiness. I mean, it's like that flows through. So together then we're working with the maladaptive network and the adaptive network. The negative things that happen in life, and then the good things, emotionally charged experiences, and the pleasant ones, just life as it's showing up, and it's good. Now, one thing that's important to note here is, and this can be helpful to know, is that once you get flipped into a maladaptive network, and I mentioned maybe earlier was the idea of getting a startle response, something startles you. But it could be a driver in front of you, it could be seeing your ex-husband or something. But at any rate, once you get into this maladaptive network, it's sometimes hard to get out of it. You know, and the other thing that's important to note here, see, an emotion up here can get triggered, and it'll start triggering emotions, feelings, and it'll light up this whole network. But you won't know why, because the images are not being lit up. I mean, it's obvious if you go to the doctor and you see somebody in a white coat, and you panic because you got a shot when you were 5 years old, and somebody in a white coat. You go, okay, well that's what happens when I go to the doctor, or the smells connect. But what's also happens is these emotions, or even the body sensations, can get triggered. They'll activate this network, and you won't be aware of why it's activated. I think that's really chronic anxiety people have, or chronic depression. It's that this maladaptive network is large enough and it's being activated on a low level enough all the time, but you're not really aware of what it is that's happening in the unconscious part of the mind, really. So painful emotional memories are stored in the maladaptive network. This is where the past gets stored in the present. What happens is, when that maladaptive network gets overloaded or full, or however you look at it, it creates a disproportional amount of emotional reactivity. And that's what you see a lot of. In other words, I might be upset about something here, my partner said the wrong thing, but it activates feelings in the maladaptive neural network that go back for a lifetime. It creates a high threshold of anxiety, people who are kind of anxious, keyed up all the time, and then also there's a low tolerance for stress. Because the maladaptive network means it's stuck, and these memories just don't resolve. Here's an example of the past and the present. An experience happens here, so this is time, and then this is an experience. And then let's say these emotional memories are triggered, activated, like the time you see your mom and dad argue, that feeling gets stored in the brain. So at a later time, there's another experience. There are new feelings get triggered, but also these feelings here get brought to the present moment, because they're always there. So that's the past now being stored in the present. And then this is the idea that when this maladaptive network becomes activated, or is full of trauma, full of emotionally charged experiences, memories that are stored that are not resolved, then it's easily activated and it's always running. So basically you're full, emotionally filled up. It spills over easily. Now this negatively impacts really everything. So individuals living life, going to work, driving down the road, can become easily upset. Couples have a hard time dealing with each other, and then in families, again, if there's a lot of emotional charge going on, then the interacting becomes more difficult, interacting effectively. So what we do with EMDR is bring down that anxiety level to a lower level, and then now the family, now you can start doing the reflective listening. Now you can start hearing your kids what they're telling you, and being more available in relationship. Okay, so now we're going to talk about EMDR and the next step.